I installed a hidden camera before my work trip. When I checked the feed, I saw my boyfriend's stepsister wearing my stolen lingerie in my bed. They betrayed me in my own sanctuary. "It looks better on you anyway," he whispered. I invited his parents for a special dinner. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. Before all the chaos began, my life was peaceful. Truly. I'm 29, and for the past few years, I'd built a life I was genuinely proud of. The biggest piece of that pride was my house. A small, two-bedroom bungalow with a little garden out back that I poured my heart and soul into. It wasn't an inheritance or a gift, it was mine. I'd worked my tail off at my accounting job, saved every penny, and after a big promotion finally gave me the salary boost I needed, I bought it. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, it was more than just a house. It was my sanctuary. My safe space in a loud world. And for 3 wonderful years, I shared that sanctuary with Russell. He was everything, or so I thought. We met through mutual friends, and he just fit. He was charming, funny, and he had this way of making me feel like the only person in the world. He moved in about a year into our relationship, and it felt right. Our routines meshed together perfectly. We'd cook dinner together most nights, our favorite jazz station playing softly in the background. I remember one evening, not long before everything changed, I was stirring a pot of pasta sauce and he came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder and hummed along with the music. "I love this," I'd whispered, leaning back into him. Just us, in our little bubble. He squeezed me tighter. "Me too, Bren. Me too." That bubble, that perfect, peaceful bubble. I had no idea how fragile it was. I had no idea that it was about to be burst by a single, devastating phone call. And I certainly had no idea that the person holding me so tightly in that moment would be the one to hand over the pin. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because we were supposed to have tacos, and I was looking forward to it all day. I'd just gotten home, kicked off my shoes, and was pulling ground beef out of the fridge when Russell walked in. He looked off. Usually, he'd come over and kiss me hello, but this time he just stood in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at his phone. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, my voice cheerful. He looked up, and the smile he gave me didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, fine. Just got a call from my dad." I paused, wiping my hands on a towel. His parents had sold their big family home a few months back. His father had retired, and they'd decided to downsize and use the money to travel the world on one of those 6-month-long cruises. I was happy for them, honestly. They deserved it. But the call meant something was up. "Are they all right? The cruise is going okay?" "Oh, yeah, the cruise is great," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's not about them. It's about Sherry." Sherry. His stepsister. His dad had remarried about 10 years ago to a woman with a daughter from a previous relationship. Sherry was 18 now. I'd only met her a handful of times at family gatherings. She always seemed a bit wild. Always on her phone, a little sullen, with a look in her eye that I couldn't quite place. Russell always just called her a handful. "What's wrong with Sherry?" I asked, starting to feel a knot form in my stomach. He finally put his phone in his pocket and walked over to the counter, leaning against it. He wouldn't look at me. "Well, you know she was staying with her mom's sister after the house sold? Turns out that's not working out. They had a big fight. Her aunt kicked her out." "Oh, no. That's awful," I said, and I meant it. No one deserves to be kicked out. "Where will she go?" And then he looked at me. And in that moment, I knew. I knew what he was going to say before the words even left his mouth. The knot in my stomach tightened into a cold, hard stone. Well, that's the thing, he said, trying for a casual tone. I told Dad not to worry. I told him she could stay with us for a bit. Just until she gets on her feet and heads off to college in the fall. The sound of the sizzling beef I'd just thrown into the pan seemed deafeningly loud in the sudden silence. I just stared at him. You told him she could stay here? With us? Yeah. I mean, where else is she gonna go, Bren? She's family. Russell, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This is my house, too. You should have asked me first. He finally pushed himself off the counter and came towards me, trying to take me in his arms, but I stepped back. His face hardened slightly. Come on, it's not a big deal. It's just for a few months. She's my stepsister, I can't just let her be homeless. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. The words echoed in my head. He had made a decision that completely upended my home, my sanctuary, without a single thought for me, and I was the one making it difficult. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him absolutely not. But looking at his face, the mix of pleading and stubbornness, I just deflated. I was a peacekeeper. I hated conflict. So, against every screaming instinct in my body, I just nodded. Okay, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Okay, Russell. She can stay. He broke into a huge grin, the tension immediately leaving his body. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. You're the best. He kissed me, a quick, triumphant peck, and then turned back to the stove. Now, let's get these tacos going, I'm starving. I stood there, frozen in the middle of my kitchen, while he happily browned the meat. The warm, comforting smell of taco seasoning now seemed nauseating. My bubble wasn't just burst, it had been invaded. And I was the one who had unlocked the door. Sherry arrived 2 days later, with 2 giant suitcases and an attitude to match. Russell had gone to pick her up, and when they walked through the door, she offered me a small, tight-lipped smile that didn't look genuine at all. Thanks for letting me crash here, Brenda, she said, her eyes already scanning the living room, taking in my things with a critical gaze. Of course, I said, forcing a smile of my own. Welcome. For the first few days, I really tried. I told myself I was overreacting. She was just an 18-year-old kid who was going through a tough time. I set up the spare bedroom for her, the room that had been my home office, my quiet place. I packed up my desk and my books, moving them into a corner of the living room. I told myself it was temporary. The initial sweetness from Sherry lasted about 48 hours. After that, her true colors started to show. It started with small things. She was messy. And I don't mean just leaving a cup on the table messy. I mean leaving wet towels on the hardwood floor messy. Leaving half-eaten bowls of cereal on the couch messy. My clean, orderly sanctuary started to feel like a chaotic dorm room. I'd come home from a long day at work to find the TV blaring, Sherry sprawled on my sofa, and a trail of her belongings, shoes, jacket, backpack, leading from the front door. Hey, Sherry, I'd say, trying to keep my voice light. Could you maybe pick up your stuff when you come in? She'd look up from her phone, annoyance flashing in her eyes. Yeah, I'll get it in a minute. The minute never came. I always ended up being the one to pick it up. Then there was the noise. She would have friends over without asking, and they'd be loud, laughing and shouting until late at night while I was trying to get some sleep before work. Or she'd be on video calls with her friends, her voice echoing through the thin walls. When I brought it up with Russell, he'd just sigh. She's just being a teenager, Brenda. Just give her some space. Russell, she's not giving me any space, I'd argue. This is my home, too. I know. I'll talk to her, he'd promise. But if he ever did, it made no difference. The breaking point for my patience came about 2 weeks in. I had this really nice, expensive bottle of lavender and chamomile shampoo that I only used as a treat. It was my little bit of luxury. One morning, I went to take a shower and found the bottle in the rack, completely empty. The cap was left off, and a watery, purple puddle was congealing on the shower floor. There was no doubt who had used it. I felt a hot flash of anger crawl up my neck. It wasn't about the shampoo, not really. It was the complete and utter lack of respect. It was the assumption that what was mine was hers to take and discard. I wrapped a towel around myself and stormed out to the living room, where she was, of course, on the couch watching TV. "Sherry," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Did you use my shampoo? The purple bottle?" She glanced over at me, looking bored. "Oh, yeah. It smelled good. It's all gone, by the way." "I know it's all gone," I said, my voice getting tighter. "It was expensive, and it was mine. You should have asked." She actually rolled her eyes. "It's just shampoo. God. It's not that deep. I'll get you another one." She never did, of course. When I told Russell what happened, he actually laughed. "Babe, are we really going to fight over shampoo? I'll buy you 10 bottles if it makes you happy." He didn't get it. He didn't see that it was a pattern. My home wasn't my own anymore. It was just a space I shared with a disrespectful stranger and a boyfriend who refused to see what was right in front of him. I started to feel like I was the crazy one. Was I just being difficult? Was I too uptight? The constant excuses and the dismissal of my feelings started to wear me down. I felt isolated in my own home, a feeling that was about to get a whole lot worse. After the shampoo incident, things started to escalate from annoying to genuinely unsettling. It was no longer just about her being messy or loud. A strange new pattern began to emerge. My things started to go missing. It began with a tube of my favorite lipstick. It was a specific shade of red, my power color, the one I wore to big meetings at work. I kept it in the little ceramic cup on my bathroom vanity. One morning, it was just gone. I searched everywhere. In my purse, in my makeup bag, in the drawers. Nothing. "Have you seen my red lipstick?" I asked Sherry later that day. I tried to sound casual, not accusatory. She barely looked up from her phone. "Nope. Don't wear red." I let it go. Maybe I had misplaced it. I told myself I was being paranoid. But then, a few days later, a pair of my favorite silver earrings vanished from my jewelry box. Then it was the small bottle of expensive perfume I kept for special occasions. Each time, I'd ask, and each time, I'd get the same blank denial. I went to Russell, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Russell, my things are disappearing. My lipstick, my earrings, my perfume. I think Sherry is taking them." He sighed, that same tired sigh he always used when I brought her up. He put his arm around me and pulled me close. "Brenda, honey, are you sure? You've been under a lot of stress lately with that big project at work. Maybe you just forgot where you put them." The word stress felt like a slap. He was turning it back on me. He was implying I was forgetful, unstable. He was gaslighting me. "I'm not stressed, Russell. I know where I keep my things. They are gone." Okay, he said, holding his hands up in surrender. "I'll talk to her. But I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." The conversation, of course, changed nothing. But it did change me. The seed of doubt he'd planted wasn't about me, it was about him. Why was he so quick to defend her? Why was he so unwilling to even consider that I might be right? The proof came a week later. I was cleaning the house, a task that had become 10 times harder since Sherry's arrival. I went into her room to grab her overflowing laundry basket, another chore she never did herself, and as I bent down, something in her little trash can caught my eye. It was a flash of familiar shiny red plastic. My heart started pounding. With trembling fingers, I reached in and pulled it out. It was my lipstick tube. And it was completely empty, scraped clean. She hadn't just taken it. She had used every last bit of it and then thrown it away in her own room, too lazy and arrogant to even bother hiding the evidence. I stood there, holding the empty tube in my hand, and I felt a wave of cold clarity wash over me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I was being lied to and stolen from in my own home. And my boyfriend, the man who was supposed to be my partner, was her biggest enabler. That night, I didn't say a word. I just watched them. I watched the way Sherry would laugh a little too loudly at Russell's jokes. I watched the way she'd find excuses to touch his arm or shoulder. And I watched the way he would smile, a smug, pleased little smile. He was enjoying the attention. He was basking in it. And I, sitting right there on the same couch, had become invisible. The trust one had in him, the very foundation of our relationship, was crumbling to dust before my very eyes. The missing lipstick was no longer the issue. The real issue was that I was starting to feel like I was losing my boyfriend, too. The lipstick was just the beginning. Once that line was crossed, it seemed like all boundaries were erased. Sherry's covert borrowing escalated into blatant appropriation. She started wearing my clothes. Not just a t-shirt here or there. I'm talking about my favorite blouses, the dresses I saved for nice dinners, even my sweaters. I'd come home from work and find her lounging on the couch, wearing the very outfit I had planned to wear the next day. The first time it happened, I was stunned into silence. She was wearing my new cashmere sweater, the one I had splurged on. "Is that my sweater?" I asked, my voice flat. She looked down at it, then back at me with a wide, innocent smile. "Oh, this? Yeah. I found it in the laundry. I figured it was clean. It's super cute, right? We have the same taste." She didn't ask. She didn't think for a second that it might be inappropriate. She just took it. And when I tried to explain to her that I wasn't comfortable with her going through my things, she pouted. "Gosh, Brenda, I'm sorry. I just thought we were like sisters. My real sister and I used to share everything." It was brilliant, in a twisted way. She framed it as a term of endearment, making me the cold, unfeeling one for wanting my own possessions. When I complained to Russell, he sided with her, of course. "She looks up to you, Bren. She thinks you're stylish. Take it as a compliment." A compliment? It felt like an invasion. It felt like she was slowly trying to erase me, to step into my life and take over. The clothes, the makeup, it was as if she was putting on a Brenda costume. And the most terrifying part was that Russell seemed to be encouraging it. The flirting became more and more obvious. It was no longer subtle touches. It was overt. We'd all be in the kitchen, and she'd lean over Russell's shoulder to see what he was cooking, her chest pressing against his back. She'd compliment his new haircut, running her fingers through his hair. She did it all right in front of me, with a sly little glance in my direction, a silent challenge in her eyes. And Russell? He ate it up. He would preen under her attention. He'd flex his muscles a little when she was around, tell his jokes a little louder. He was performing for her. The moment that really broke something inside me happened one Friday night. I was exhausted after a long week. All I wanted was a quiet dinner and a movie. As we were eating, Sherry, who was wearing one of my silk blouses, accidentally knocked her glass of red wine over. It didn't spill on the table. It spilled directly onto Russell's lap. "Oh my God!" I am so sorry, she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in mock horror. Before I could even grab a napkin, she was out of her chair and kneeling beside him. Let me get that for you, she cooed, grabbing a dish towel and beginning to dab, very slowly and deliberately, at the stain on his jeans, her hand moving dangerously high up his thigh. I just sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. The air was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with spilled wine. Russell wasn't pushing her away. He was just sitting there, a stupid grin on his face, watching her. He looked up and caught my eye, and for a split second, I saw a flash of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. I dropped my fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. Neither of them even flinched. I'm tired, I said, my voice cold and hollow. I think I'm going to bed. I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them there. I didn't look back. I went into our bedroom, my bedroom, and closed the door. I didn't cry. I was past tears. I just stood in the dark, listening. I could hear their muffled laughter from the dining room. They hadn't missed me at all. I was a ghost in my own home, haunting the edges of a life that was no longer mine. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something much worse than spilled wine was happening right under my roof. I had a work trip scheduled for the following weekend. A 2-day conference in a city about 3 hours away. In the past, I would have been excited about it. A chance to learn, to network, and to have a nice hotel room all to myself. But now, the thought of leaving filled me with a deep, consuming dread. The thought of leaving Russell and Sherry alone in my house, it was unbearable. The day before I was due to leave, I was packing my suitcase. I had a specific outfit in mind for the conference dinner on Saturday night. It was a professional but elegant event, and I wanted to look my best. I had bought a beautiful, delicate black lace lingerie set to wear under my dress. It was expensive, a real indulgence. I kept it tucked away in a silk pouch in the back of my underwear drawer, saving it for a special occasion. I opened the drawer. I pushed aside my everyday things, reaching for the back corner where the pouch should be. My fingers met with empty wood. I frowned. That's odd. I emptied the entire drawer onto the bed. Socks, underwear, pajamas, everything. No silk pouch. No black lace. A cold panic started to prickle at my skin. It couldn't be. Not that. That was too personal, too intimate. It was one thing to take a sweater or a lipstick, but this was a violation of the highest order. I tore through my other drawers, my closet, my laundry hamper. My search grew more frantic with every empty space. It was gone. It was well and truly gone. My breathing grew shallow. My heart was hammering against my ribs. There was only one person who could have taken it. The image of Sherry, wearing my most intimate apparel, flashed in my mind, and I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go. I found her in the living room, scrolling through her phone, as usual. I stood in front of her, blocking the TV. I was holding the empty silk pouch in my hand. "Where is it, Sherry?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She looked up, feigning confusion. "Where is what?" "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped, my control finally breaking. "My black lace set. The one that was in this pouch. Where is it?" She looked at the pouch, and then back at me. And then she did something that made my blood run cold. She smirked. A tiny, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of her mouth. And then it was gone, replaced by a look of wide-eyed concern. "Lingerie?" "Brenda, I would never go through your drawers like that," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Are you sure you didn't just misplace it? You seem so stressed lately." Stressed. There was that word again. The word they both used to dismiss me, to make me feel like I was the problem, like I was losing my mind. But in that moment, looking into her cold, calculating eyes, I wasn't losing my mind. I was finding it. The fog of confusion and self-doubt cleared, and I saw her for exactly what she was, a predator. A snake I had welcomed into my home. And I saw Russell for what he was, her willing accomplice. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. The fight was over. The argument was pointless. Pleading with Russell was useless. If I wanted the truth, I was going to have to get it myself. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could no longer trust anything I couldn't see with my own two eyes. My work trip was no longer just a business obligation. It was an opportunity. That afternoon, I told Russell I needed to run out to buy a few last-minute things for my trip. He was on the couch, watching a game with Sherry, and barely grunted in response. The ease with which they now occupied our shared space, excluding me completely, only hardened my resolve. I didn't go to the mall. I drove straight to an electronics store, the kind that has a whole section dedicated to home security. I felt a strange mix of shame and determination as I walked down the aisle, looking at the rows of tiny cameras. This wasn't me. I wasn't a spy. I wasn't the kind of person who snooped. But they had turned me into this person. They had left me no other choice. I found what I was looking for, a small, unassuming digital alarm clock with a high-definition camera hidden in the face. It was perfect. It was Wi-Fi enabled, which meant I could watch a live feed from my phone, wherever I was. I paid in cash, my hand trembling slightly as I handed the bills to the cashier. The whole drive home, the box sat on the passenger seat, feeling like a bomb. Getting it into the bedroom without being seen was nerve-wracking. Luckily, they were still engrossed in the game. I went into my bedroom, closed the door, and my heart hammered in my chest. I quickly unplugged the old alarm clock on my nightstand and replaced it with the new one. It looked completely normal. I fumbled with the tiny instructions, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb, and managed to connect it to the Wi-Fi and sync it with an app on my phone. I did a quick test. I could see my empty bedroom, clear as day, on my phone screen. It worked. A wave of nausea washed over me. What was I doing? What if I was wrong? What if I was destroying my relationship over a misplaced set of lingerie and a heavy dose of paranoia? For a moment, I almost unplugged it. I almost took it back to the store. But then, I thought of Sherry's smirk. I thought of Russell's dismissive sighs. I thought of the feeling of being a stranger in my own home. This wasn't just about lingerie anymore. This was about my sanity. This was about the truth. I left the clock where it was. The next morning, as I packed the last of my things, I felt a strange sense of calm. Russell helped me carry my suitcase to the car. He kissed me goodbye at the driver's side door. "Drive safe," he said, smiling. "Call me when you get to the hotel." "I will," I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I looked at his face, trying to see the man I fell in love with, but all I could see was a stranger. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back at my house. My beautiful, peaceful sanctuary. It looked exactly the same as it always did. But I knew it wasn't. It was a crime scene waiting to happen. And I had just set up the only witness. Whatever I found when I checked that camera feed, I knew, deep in my soul, nothing would ever be the same again. The 3-hour drive to the conference felt like an eternity. My mind was a chaotic storm of possibilities, each one worse than the last. I tried to listen to a podcast, then to music, but I couldn't focus. The only thing I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own heart. I checked into the hotel, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign the registration form. I got to my room, a sterile, anonymous space, and dropped my bags on the floor. I didn't unpack. I didn't even take my coat off. I just stood in the middle of the room, staring at my phone. It lay on the bed, dark and silent, but it felt like it was humming with a terrible energy. Everything I needed to know, or perhaps everything I was terrified of knowing, was inside that little black rectangle. For a long time, I just stood there. Maybe I shouldn't look. Maybe it's better not to know. If I just ignore it, maybe I can go home on Sunday and pretend everything is fine. We could work through this. People make mistakes. But I knew that was a lie. I couldn't unknow what I suspected. I couldn't unfeel the constant disrespect, the slow, painful erosion of my trust and my sanity. I had to know. I deserved to know. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I walked over to the bed, sat on the edge, and picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the app icon, a generic little symbol of a security camera. I tapped it. The app opened, and a loading screen appeared. It felt like it took hours. And then, the live feed flickered to life. The image was crystal clear. It was my bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the window. The bed was neatly made, just as I'd left it that morning. Everything was quiet and still. I watched for what felt like 10, maybe 15 minutes. Nothing happened. A small, foolish part of me started to feel a flicker of relief. See? I was wrong. I was being crazy. They're probably just downstairs watching TV. I was about to close the app when the bedroom door opened. My breath caught in my throat. It was Sherry. She crept into the room, closing the door softly behind her. She stood there for a moment, looking around, as if making sure she was alone. Then, she walked directly over to my closet and opened the door. I watched, my body rigid, as she sifted through my clothes. She pulled out my favorite silk robe and held it up to herself, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror on the door. She then moved to my dresser. My heart pounded as she opened the top drawer, my underwear drawer. She rummaged through it, and then she pulled something out. Even on the small screen, I could see it clearly. It was the black lace bra. Then, the matching panties. She held them up, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. It was happening. It was all real. She quickly undressed, tossing her own clothes carelessly onto my armchair. And then, she put on my lingerie. My lingerie. She adjusted the straps, turning this way and that in front of the mirror, admiring herself. She wasn't just wearing it, she was performing in it. She was playing a role. The role of me. I felt a guttural sob rise in my throat, but I choked it down. I couldn't look away. Just then, the bedroom door opened again. It was Russell. He walked in, and he wasn't surprised. There was no shock on his face when he saw his stepsister standing in the middle of his girlfriend's bedroom, wearing his girlfriend's underwear. He just smiled. I was wondering where you went, he said, his voice low and intimate. I wanted to put on something special, Sherry purred, walking towards him. He met her in the middle of the room, and he kissed her. A long, deep, passionate kiss that made my stomach churn with a violent mixture of grief and rage. It was not the kiss of a man making a mistake. It was the kiss of a man who had done this before. They broke apart, and he looked her up and down. It looks better on you anyway, he said. Those words. Those 7 words hit me harder than a physical blow. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a replacement. I watched as he led her to my bed. My bed. The bed we had shared for 3 years. The bed where I had slept, dreaming of a future with him. And they fell onto it together. I finally looked away. I dropped the phone onto the hotel bedspread as if it were on fire. The room started to spin. I scrambled to the bathroom, my hand clasped over my mouth, and retched into the toilet, but nothing came up. There was only a hollow, aching emptiness inside me. The pain was a physical thing. It was a crushing weight on my chest, a fire in my veins. The man I loved, the life I had built, the home I cherished, it was all a lie. A sick, twisted joke, and I was the punchline. I slid down the cool tile of the bathroom wall until I was sitting on the floor, my arms wrapped around my knees, and I stared at the blank wall opposite me. The tears wouldn't come. I felt numb. As if all the emotion had been burned out of me, leaving nothing but a cold, empty shell. I don't know how long I sat there on the cold bathroom floor. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. Time had ceased to have any meaning. The world outside that sterile hotel room, the conference I was supposed to attend, my job, my friends, it all faded away into an insignificant blur. The only reality was the searing image burned into my mind, the image of them, in my room, in my bed. Slowly, almost mechanically, I got to my feet. I walked back into the main room and picked up my phone. I didn't look at the screen. I couldn't bear to see it again. My fingers, moving with a will of their own, navigated the app. I found the record function. I saved the entire video clip, from the moment Sherry entered the room to the point where I couldn't watch anymore. Then I went to my laptop. I plugged in my phone and transferred the file. I saved it to the hard drive. Then I uploaded it to a private cloud storage account. Then, just to be absolutely sure, I saved it again onto a tiny USB flash drive that I carried on my keychain. I made 3 copies. 3 pieces of undeniable, soul-crushing proof. As I completed the final transfer, I felt something shift inside me. The crushing, suffocating grief began to recede. And in its place, something else started to grow. It was a cold, hard, quiet thing. It started as a tiny ember in the pit of my stomach and slowly grew, spreading through my veins until it consumed me entirely. It was rage. But it wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was a silent, focused fury. The kind of anger that doesn't lash out. The kind that waits. The kind that plans. The tears I thought I'd never shed finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were hot tears of pure, unadulterated anger. They streamed down my face, but I didn't make a sound. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't a doormat to be walked on. And I certainly wasn't stressed or crazy. I was a woman who had been profoundly wronged. And I would not let them get away with it. I stood up and walked over to the large window of my hotel room. I looked out at the glittering city lights below, but I didn't see them. I saw a stage. I saw a play, and the final act was about to be written. And I was going to be the director. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was tearing my lungs apart. The sobs subsided. The shaking stopped. A chilling sense of purpose settled over me. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea what they had just created. I picked up my phone again. This time, I didn't open the camera app. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled down to Russell's mom. As I looked out that window, a small, cold smile touched my lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. Showtime, I whispered to my reflection in the dark glass. The next morning, I woke up feeling clear. The storm of emotion from the night before had passed, leaving behind a hard, calm certainty. I showered, got dressed for the conference, and put on my makeup with a steady hand. I put on my Power Red lipstick, a brand new tube I'd bought on the way to the hotel. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a stranger staring back. The soft, trusting woman I used to be was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, but someone I knew I could count on. I went to the conference. I sat through the keynote speakers. I took notes. I networked during the coffee breaks. I was a perfect picture of professionalism. No one would have guessed that my entire world had been detonated just hours before. I was an actress now, and this was my dress rehearsal. During the lunch break, I found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby. It was time to set the stage. I took up my phone and dialed Russell's mom, Martha. My heart gave a little nervous flutter, but I pushed it down. I could do this. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and friendly. Brenda. How are you, dear? How's the conference? I injected a bright, cheerful note into my own voice. It's great, Martha. Learning a lot. But listen, the reason I'm calling is, I was thinking. I feel like we haven't had a proper family dinner in ages. And I know Sherry is settling in so well, I just wanted to do something nice. Oh, Brenda, that's so thoughtful of you, she said, and I could hear the pleasure in her voice. I was thinking, what about next Saturday night? I'll be back, and I could cook something special. I'd love for you and Frank to come over. A little family get-together. I paused, then added the masterstroke. You know, I just got news that a small inheritance from my great-aunt is finally coming through, nothing huge, but it just puts me in a celebratory mood. I feel like I should share the good fortune. By mentioning money, I knew I was making the event seem more significant, more legitimate. It was a celebration, not a confrontation. An inheritance. That's wonderful news, dear. Martha gushed. Of course, we'd love to come. Frank will be so pleased. What time should we be there? How about 7? I said, my voice sweet as sugar. It'll be so good to see you both. And you know, Sherry has been such a wonderful houseguest. We simply have to celebrate her. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I was worried, you know, with her being such a handful sometimes. But Russell told me you two were getting along like sisters. A bitter laugh almost escaped my lips, but I swallowed it. Oh, yes, I said. Like sisters. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone. Phase 1 was complete. The guests of honor had been invited. They had no idea they were about to be the star witnesses at a trial. I spent the rest of the conference on autopilot, my mind constantly running through the plan for Saturday night. Every detail had to be perfect. The food, the music, the lighting, the timing. Everything had to be just right to achieve maximum impact. This wasn't just about exposing them. It was about taking back my power, in my own home, on my own terms. They had humiliated me in secret. I was going to destroy them in public. Or at least, in front of the two people whose opinions they cared about most in the world. When I drove home on Sunday afternoon, the house felt different. It was tainted. I walked through the door and the air felt heavy, thick with their betrayal. Russell and Sherry were on the couch, watching a movie. They greeted me with casual smiles, asking about my trip. I smiled back. I told them it was productive. I told them I was tired. I played the part of the returning girlfriend perfectly. That night, sleeping in my own bed was torture. I could feel the ghost of their encounter in the sheets, in the air. I barely slept. But it didn't matter. I was running on adrenaline and a cold, burning sense of purpose now. The days leading up to Saturday were the longest of my life, but I was patient. Good things, and terrible reckonings, come to those who wait. When Saturday arrived, I was a bundle of calm, focused energy. I spent the day cleaning the house until it sparkled. It was my way of reclaiming my space, of scrubbing away their filth. Then, I started cooking. I made Russell's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes and asparagus. The irony was delicious. I set the table with my best china and silverware. I put on a playlist of soft, inoffensive dinner music. I lit candles. The house looked warm, welcoming, and completely normal. No one would ever suspect it was a carefully constructed trap. Russell and Sherry were both impressed. Wow, Bren, you're really going all out, Russell said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt cold. I just felt like celebrating, I said with a serene smile. His parents, Martha and Frank, arrived promptly at 7. They were lovely people, and a part of me felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to put them through. But they deserved to know the truth about their son, and the girl they had so graciously welcomed into their family. The first hour was a masterpiece of deception. I was the perfect hostess. I poured wine. I passed around appetizers. I asked Frank about his golf game and complimented Martha on her new haircut. I even drew Sherry into the conversation, asking her about her college plans with a sickeningly sweet sincerity. She and Russell exchanged a quick, smug look, clearly thinking I had finally accepted her and was making an effort. The fools. We sat down to dinner, and the conversation flowed easily. I kept their glasses full and their plates piled high. I steered the conversation, keeping it light and breezy. All the while, my phone was in my apron pocket, a silent, heavy weight against my hip. As everyone was finishing their main course, I stood up. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, my voice clear and steady. All eyes turned to me. I raised my wine glass. "I want to toast to family," I began, looking around the table, meeting each of their eyes. "To the bonds that hold us together, to trust, and to being honest with one another. And I especially want to toast to Sherry." Sherry beamed, looking utterly self-satisfied. Russell squeezed her shoulder proudly. "When Sherry first came to stay with us," I continued, my voice taking on a more serious tone, "I'll admit, it was an adjustment. But she has truly made this place her own. She has settled in so completely." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. "And to show you all just how well Sherry has made herself at home, I've prepared a little home video for us to watch." A flicker of confusion crossed their faces. Martha looked curious. Russell and Sherry just looked puzzled. "It's on the TV in the living room," I said with a bright smile. "Let's all go watch. Bring your wine." I led the way from the dining room into the living room. They followed, unsuspecting. I picked up the TV remote from the coffee table. My heart was a drum against my ribs, but my hand was perfectly steady. I took a deep breath. It was time. I turned to face them, my smile gone. "Please, have a seat." They sat down, Martha and Frank on the sofa, Russell and Sherry in the 2 armchairs. They were still smiling, expecting some funny slideshow of photos. I didn't sit. I stood in front of the large television screen. I took my phone out of my pocket and quickly mirrored it to the TV. The familiar background of my phone appeared on the 65-inch screen. And then, I opened the video file. I pressed play. The first image to fill the screen was my bedroom. My sunlit, peaceful bedroom. There was a collective murmur of confusion. And then, the bedroom door in the video opened, and Sherry walked in. The silence in the living room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I watched their faces. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Frank's jaw went slack. They were looking at the screen, then at Sherry, then back at the screen, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. Sherry's face had drained of all color. She looked like a cornered animal. Russell was frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. He knew what was coming. On the screen, video Sherry opened my closet, my dresser. She pulled out my lingerie. A horrified gasp escaped Martha's lips. Video Sherry put on my things, preening in front of the mirror. And then, the door opened, and video Russell walked in. He smiled. He kissed her. He said the words, "It looks better on you anyway." A strangled, guttural sound came from Frank's throat. Martha started to sob, quiet, broken little sounds. The scene on the screen continued, them falling onto my bed. I let it play for 5 more agonizing seconds before I hit pause. I paused it on a close-up of their 2 faces, locked in a passionate embrace. My replacement, and my betrayer. The room exploded into chaos. Martha was openly weeping now, Frank's face a mask of purple rage as he stood up and pointed a trembling finger at his son. You! How could you? He roared. Russell just sat there, head in his hands, unable to speak. Sherry was hyperventilating, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape that didn't exist. And right there, watching their world crumble, watching the lies and deceit burn away under the harsh light of the truth, I felt free. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you gave me a like, and it tells me you're right here with me on this journey. Your support means the world to me and gives me the strength to go on. Please, comment the number 1, and let me tell you what happened next. As Frank's shouts and Martha's sobs filled the room, I stood there, completely still. I was the calm eye of the hurricane I had created. I let them scream. I let them cry. I let the full weight of their actions crash down upon them. Russell tried to stammer out an explanation, something about it being a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. Sherry just sat there, tears streaming down her face, a pathetic, broken doll. I waited until Frank's shouting subsided into heavy, ragged breaths. I waited until Martha's sobs quieted to whimpers. I waited until the only sounds were the dinner music still playing softly from the other room and the ragged breathing of 4 shattered people. Then, I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a knife. Get out. They all looked at me. Russell's head snapped up, his eyes pleading. Brenda, please, let's just talk about this. There is nothing to talk about, I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. I looked from his face to Sherry's. You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out of my house. Both of you. For a moment, no one moved. Then, the reality of my words seemed to sink in. Martha started to say something, Brenda, dear, maybe, but I shot her a look that silenced her instantly. This was no longer a family drama. This was an eviction. I was already thinking about calling a lawyer on Monday to see what my legal options were, to ensure I was protected from any further fallout. Russell, seeing the absolute, unshakable resolve in my eyes, finally stumbled to his feet. He looked at Sherry. Get your stuff, he mumbled, his voice thick with shame. What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. I stood in the living room, arms crossed, and watched them. I watched as they scrambled back and forth from their rooms, throwing clothes and belongings haphazardly into suitcases and garbage bags. They moved with a frantic, pathetic urgency. Martha and Frank just sat on the couch, utterly defeated, watching the consequences of their son's actions unfold. They didn't help. They didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. Sherry avoided my gaze entirely, her face blotchy and tear-stained. Russell kept looking at me, his eyes full of a desperate, pleading hope. He was still looking for a crack in my armor, a sign of weakness he could exploit. He found none. The woman he knew, the woman who hated conflict and always gave in, was gone. He had killed her. And the woman standing in her place would not bend. At exactly 1 hour, they were standing at the front door with their bags. The air was thick with unspoken words and suffocating shame. Russell turned to me one last time. Brenda, he started. Goodbye, Russell, I said, my voice flat. I opened the front door for them. He and Sherry shuffled out onto the porch, into the dark night. Martha and Frank followed, their heads bowed. They didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect them to. After they had all stepped off my porch, I put my hand on the door. I looked at Russell's pathetic face one last time. And then, I slammed the door shut. The sound echoed through the silent house. It was a definitive, final, beautiful sound. I leaned my back against the door and slid the deadbolt home. The solid, metallic click of the lock was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of safety. The sound of freedom. The sound of the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for months. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly at peace in my own home. The days that followed were a blur of cleaning and reclaiming. The first thing I did was call a locksmith and have every single lock on my house changed. Then, I went through the house with garbage bags. Every single thing Russell had ever left behind, his clothes, his books, his toothbrush, went into a bag. I didn't keep a single memento. I dropped 6 heavy bags off at a charity donation bin without a second thought. Then, I tackled Sherry's room, my old office. I scrubbed it from top to bottom. I opened the windows to air out the last traces of her cloying perfume and her toxic presence. I slowly, lovingly, moved my desk and my books back into their rightful place. It was hard work. It was emotionally exhausting. But with every bag I threw out, with every surface I scrubbed, I felt lighter. I was purging them not just from my house, but from my life. I was taking my sanctuary back, piece by piece. A few weeks later, Martha called. She apologized profusely. She told me Frank was so disappointed in Russell he could barely speak to him. She said they were staying at a cheap motel and that Sherry had gone back to live with her mother. I listened politely, but I felt nothing. Their problems were not my problems anymore. I appreciate the call, Martha, I said, my voice calm. But I am moving on with my life. I wish you all the best. And then I hung up and blocked their numbers. It's been a few months now. My life is quiet again. At first, the silence was deafening. The house felt too big, too empty. But slowly, I started to fill it again. Not with another person, but with myself. I started painting again, a hobby I'd let slide. I rearranged the furniture. I planted new flowers in the garden. I filled the quiet space with music that I loved, with the smell of food that I wanted to cook. I learned a hard lesson. I learned that sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the deepest. But I also learned that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. I learned that my peace is worth fighting for, and my boundaries are not negotiable. I learned to trust that little voice inside me, that gut feeling that tells you when something is wrong. It's a voice I will never ignore again. My house is quiet now. The drama is gone. The betrayal is a scar, but it no longer hurts to the touch. It's just a part of my story, a reminder of what I survived. It's not just a house anymore, it's my sanctuary. And I am its only queen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means a lot to be able to share it. If you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own peace, your own sanctuary, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Remember, you are not alone, and you are so much stronger than you think.